you for joining me today on the Cosmic Bible, God's Word for today and beyond. And I am Dr. S.W. Kibler, your guide into the biblical text where truth lives. We're going to continue this series. We've been looking at the Tower of Babel and the fallout, worldwide fallout, including in looking at how the sons of God have actually changed and motivated a lot of history since the Tower of Babel. Last week we looked at Easter and how it was implemented as a replacement for the Passover. And the Passover was the actual holiday, the actual holy day, the actual feast day that was given to the children of Israel after their deliverance from Egypt. It was a day that they were to recount and to keep, and that is the actual date that Christ was crucified. And then he arose 3 days later. Easter was implemented as a replacement for that. We looked at how the rituals and customary accoutrements that go along with Easter are actually tied to the worship of not Yeshua, but Nimrod, also known as Baal or Baal, and Semiramis, the Queen of Heaven, and Tammuz, their son. In this video presentation, we're going to take a look at Christmas. Yes, I know this will be difficult for some of you, but I believe it's more important to know the truth, and to stand on the truth and to speak the truth, even when that truth is in opposition to church or religious tradition. And I hope you agree. We're going to look in Deuteronomy 12, 29 through 31 as a background passage for the worship of the Lord and what he said to not do. As Moses was directing the children of Israel, he spoke these words from the Lord. When the Lord your God cuts off from before you the nations whom you go into dispossess, and you dispossess them and dwell in their land, take care that you not be ensnared to follow them after they have been destroyed before you, that you do not inquire about their gods, saying, how did these nations serve their gods, so that I also may do the same? No, don't do that. It says, you shall not worship the Lord your God in that way. Whatever way that is, don't do it. However, someone else worships some other god, don't do that for the Lord. Right? It says, for every abominable thing that the Lord hates, they have done to their gods. So how they worship their gods, the Lord considers an abomination. So don't incorporate it and call it worship to Yahweh, to the Creator God, to the Most High God. For they even burn their sons and their daughters in the fire to their gods. So, what is worship? The Lord, the Most High God, Yahweh, says, don't incorporate these heathen nations' worship of their gods and say that you're worshiping me with them. Don't do that. Their ways of worship, they're an abomination to the Lord. That's what he says. So it's important for us to realize how we worship the Creator, the Most High God, right, is not to be made up by us. We don't get to make up how we're going to do it. And we can't copy it from how others worship other gods. The Lord said how he wanted to be worshiped. And Jesus said, you must worship God in spirit and in truth. Truth. But exactly what the Lord said not to happen, that's exactly what has happened. It's occurred in Christianity. The manners of worshiping other gods has come in, taken place, replaced, and become very comfortable as acceptable worship for the Most High God, Yahweh, our Lord. And what I'm going to present is going to be difficult, I know, for some of you to receive, because it doesn't agree with current Christian church tradition or culture. So we must individually determine for our own self what's more important, tradition or truth, right? The biblical truth, what the biblical text says. Well, for me, my household, we stick to the truth, the biblical text. So let's look at worship. In the Hebrew, the word for worship is shakah, and in the Greek is proskuneho. And both mean the same thing. It means one thing, to bow down, to prostrate oneself. That's what worship is. It's not singing. I mean, that's not worship. It's not how you feel about it. Right? It's not how it makes you feel. It's not how it makes you feel good or makes you cry or you become elated or you can wave your hands. That's not worship. It's bowing yourself down, your own will, your way, putting it aside and giving way to the Lord, to His will, His way, His word. Then, that is worship. Now, we look at the biblical text at hand. We're going to be looking at the Tower of Babel and the worldwide fallout, right? And we're going to be looking at Christmas, more precisely, where that came from. Right? What are the roots, the ancient roots? So we've been taught that Christmas is a celebration of the birthday of Jesus Christ. Well, the biblical text tells us that that's not the day Jesus was born. December 25th, not the day. So why would we celebrate Jesus' birthday when it's not on His birthday? When we have a really, really good idea of when it is. Right? So, also, why isn't there a reference of the celebration of the birthday in the New Testament text? Why? It's not there. They didn't celebrate the birth of Christ. Matter of fact, they really didn't celebrate birthdays. Why didn't the Pilgrims and the Puritans celebrate Christmas? And why was Christmas outlawed in the original 13 colonies in America? Why? Because they knew the truth. And they stood on the truth. So we're going to look at Jeremiah 10, chapter 10, verses 2 through 4. It's just kind of interesting. Let's look at it. Thus says the Lord, learn not the way of the nations, nor be dismayed at the signs of the heavens, because the nations are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are vanity. A tree from the forest is cut down and worked with an axe by the hands of a craftsman. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with a hammer and nails so that it cannot move. Do you notice any similarity to a Christmas tree by the description? So we're just going to do a little review of Nimrod and Constantine. Nimrod, we know, was the grandson of one of Noah's sons named Ham. Ham had a son named Cush. Cush married a woman named Semiramis. Cush and Semiramis then had a son named Nimrod. After Cush died, Nimrod married his own mother, and he became a powerful king. And the Bible tells us this in Genesis 10, and we're just going to read a portion. And Cush begot Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one on earth. He was a mighty hunter in the face of the Lord. He was a tyrant. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the tyrant, or in the mighty hunter in the face of Yahweh, at the beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh, in the land of Shinar. So Nimrod became this God-man to the people. And Semiramis, his wife and mother, became a powerful queen of ancient Babylon. Nimrod, eventually he was killed. You remember from the previous lesson. His body was cut in pieces and scattered across the kingdom, and Semiramis had him regathered, but there was one missing, his male genitalia. And Semiramis claimed that he could not come back missing that part, and so she told the people of Babylon that Nimrod had ascended to the sun and was now to be called Baal, the sun god. And we see that there are many other names that he was called by. Queen Semiramis also proclaimed that Baal would be present on earth in the form of a flame, whether a candle or lamp or fire, when used in worship or recognition. And Semiramis was creating, a mystery religion. And this was with the help of the sons of God. That's who she was actually worshiping. and Baal was one of them. We also know his name became Satan. Now, Baal and Nimrod. Nimrod did not become Baal or Baal, but Baal took his place after Nimrod had set up the kingdom. Was very popular, and people were following him. Just kind of assumed that's what the speculation is. We looked last week at Easter, another name for Semiramis, the Queen of Heaven, and that was a day that commemorated the resurrection of one of their gods, Tammuz, who was said to be immaculately concepted son of Baal after Nimrod had died, and then with Semiramis. And there is some evidence, I think it's probably accurate, that Tammuz was a Nephilim, offspring of Baal, or one of the sons of God, and a woman of man. Her name was Semiramis. So remember, there are a lot of different names that these gods went under: Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. Nimrod was also known as Belus, Ra, Ninus, Baal, El, Zeus, Jupiter, Odin, Vishnu, and Lucifer. Semiramis was also known as Easter, Isis, Beltis, Ashtoreth, Astarte, Aphrodite, Diana, Joro, Chandra, and Diana. And Tammuz was also known as Horus, Hercules, Bacchus, Dionysus, Apollo, Thor, Krishna, and the Antichrist in Luciferian belief systems. So all those goddesses, they all refer back to the same three: Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz. So we're going to look at Constantine just as a refresher. You'll remember that under the guise of Christianity, that Constantine led his troops and conquered the city of Rome and took over the Roman government in 312 AD after his dad died. And then a year later, Constantine issued a decree of tolerance, which meant that Christians would be able to free to worship and were not to be persecuted anymore. And that seemed like a really good idea, that they weren't going to be persecuted and tortured anymore. Yet the intent was not so much for the Christians as it was to start a one world government church that became known as Roman Catholicism. And the word Catholicism, or Catholic, it means universal. It was just a one world church. That's what they were building. As you know, Satan has always intended for there to be a one world religion. I'm not saying that people who go to Catholic church are Satanists. Know what I'm saying? I'm saying this is how it started. Just letting you know that Satan has always intended for there to be a one world church, and he's not going to stand in its way. A religion to take over the world, to become a one world church, but not worship the Most High in the way that the Most High is to be worshipped, because Satan is antagonistic to that. So later on in 325 AD, Constantine set up the Council of Nicaea. He became the Summus Pontifex, that is the pontiff or the pope, as well as Caesar. He was the Caesar and pope. So it's a political and religious movement that's taking place here. They convened the Council of Nicaea, and that's where they implemented this Greco-Roman type of version of a religion that became known as Christianity. And they also established Easter at that time as a law of a replacement for Passover, right? Which was just a replacement for Passover. Instead of the truth, they had this other festivity called Easter, which was, as we learned last time, just a recognition of Semiramis, right? Nimrod, the pagan sun god, also known, referred to as Saturn at times, was said to be born on December 25th. Now, remember, this is thousands of years before Christ. And the worship continued on through the time of Christ and past the time of Christ, of Saturnalia, which was done on December 25th, which started with Nimrod in celebration of his birthday. Constantine believed that by incorporating Christianity and the other worship of these different gods, that he could bring complacency, pacify the people of Rome by making this one religion, then incorporated everything. That's what the religion incorporated, everything. It wasn't just Christ, it was every god could be worshipped. And all at the same time, by the way. They just changed the names and incorporated the worship of Easter and then the birth of Christ into, guess what? When other gods were born and already celebrated. Okay? So Nimrod sometimes is referred to as the Lord of Christmas because that was his birthday, December 25th, and it had been celebrated for thousands of years as the birthday of Nimrod, not Jesus. And from that we get Tammuz, who is the offspring of the deceased Nimrod from Baal, and Semiramis, whose name was Tammuz. So there's evidence that he was, like I said, a Nephilim. And Nimrod was worshipped as the sun god, as Baal. And then Semiramis was worshipped as a moon goddess. And we see the Queen of Heaven, Semiramis, and her child in many religious paintings that we are told are Mary and the Christ child. But in many of them, the originals, the small figure is a full-grown man, not a baby, that's being held by the Queen of Heaven, Semiramis. And also, what people refer to as halos, signifying holiness, are not halos. They are ancient sun discs. That's what they're representing, sun discs commemorating the sun god Nimrod. Right? Ra, Baal. So they just incorporated what they had already been doing and then started calling it Christian. But it was really incorporating the worship and paraphernalia and ritual of other god worship. So in short, December 25th was a day that commemorated the worship of the sun god, Baal, Nimrod, Satan, as opposed to the true living God of the Bible. This is part of the rebellion of the sons of God, right? That worldwide fallout. And this has led to a number of pagan customs being practiced, and still today are, the Christmas season. Now, we're going to go back to the Tower of Babel. The Most High God, if you remember, he had disinherited the nations and the people because they continually rebelled against him. He came down, he confused their language, and he scattered them. He also disinherited them and divided them among some of his divine creations, sometimes called angels, also referred to as the sons of God. And they were to rule justly over the people. They didn't do it, but that's what they were supposed to do. Right? And we read that in Deuteronomy 32, 8 through 9. It says, when the Most High God, right, the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, when he did do that, Tower of Babel, he fixed the borders of the peoples. How? According to the number of the sons of God, these divine beings. And they were to rule the people justly, and the people were to follow them. And the Lord said, I'm going to pull out a specific people to myself. You guys, you don't want to worship me. I'm disinheriting you. I'm going to make my own family. And that's when he selected Abram. Right? Okay. So that's why it says, but the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted heritage. So it wasn't just Abraham and Isaac. It was really the descendants of Jacob that became his people. The sons of God allowed the people to start worshiping them. This is the big thing. They began to be worshiped as gods. They allowed themselves to be worshipped as gods because that's what the people wanted. The people did not want to worship the Most High God. Right? And so they started worshiping these sons of God, these extraterrestrials, if you will, that the Lord had placed over the people to rule them justly. They didn't. They didn't rule them justly. They let the people go into debauchery and do whatever they wanted to. And as we see now, part of that worship was what turned into Christmas, right? The celebration of Baal, or the birth of Nimrod, who became known as Baal, or Baal assumed that position, because Nimrod had been calling down the sons of God. That's the whole idea behind the Tower of Babel, was to call down the sons of God and worship them and have them do favors for them. So that's when the sons of God, at least this one Baal, took advantage of Nimrod's fame and his death, and of Semiramis' queenship, and he began ruling those people, Baal. There are some pagan customs that originated with the worship of Nimrod, Semiramis, and Tammuz, and one of those is the Christmas tree. After Nimrod's death, Semiramis proclaimed that overnight, a full-grown evergreen tree popped up on the grave of where most of the body parts of Nimrod had been buried. And that proved that Nimrod's spirit still lived. And so every year on his birthday, December 25th, they would bring and put presents to Nimrod under the evergreen tree. And they were really waiting his return. Also, Yule logs were burned. And as you remember, that Nimrod, or Baal, was to be present in the flame, whether it be candle or lamp or whatever, as long as he was being recognized. And that was done on the eve before the celebration of Nimrod's birthday. So it's what we call Christmas Eve. And they had some other customs that they would do as well. So Constantine was used by the rebellious sons of God and Baal to deceive Christians and the world, to instill idolatry, false worship. The kind of worship that people worship these other gods with, and just called it Christian and made it acceptable in common practice. And that's where we get our culturally appropriate Christmas and Easter traditions, not from the New Testament, not from the Old Testament, not from the biblical text, and not from 300 years of Christianity, but after, right? After. It was an incorporation of the worship of these other gods, right? God commanded, don't do it. Don't incorporate that worship and call it worship to me. It's abominable to me. I detest it. I don't want it. Don't do it. And yet, the rebellious sons of God and Satan, they were able to fool Christianity, Christians and the whole world, into doing just exactly what the Lord said don't do. Amazing. It was Constantine in 325 AD who first introduced as an immovable annual feast on December 25th and called it Christmas. Before that, it was called Saturnalia. Even the Roman emperor, that was in 274 AD, Emperor Aurelian proclaimed that date officially for Rome as the festival of the birth of the sun god. And that same day later was that, oh no, we're going to call it Christmas. And everybody can worship, and we're just going to incorporate the way that we worship the sun god. Now we're going to just say we're doing it for Jesus. Well, it's too bad. And then in 354, Bishop Liberius, he officially ordered everyone that they had to celebrate the birth of Jesus on December 25th, although biblical evidence, the textual evidence, does not coincide with December 25th for the birth of Christ, but another day, actually in September. So we can see it's easy to determine that what we know as Christmas was implemented by an organized Roman political and religious agenda. It was implemented It's Christmas on a day that shared the celebration of the sun god, Nimrod. This is how it goes all the way back to the Tower of Babel. Back to Nimrod. The festivities that are so common with the celebration of Christmas are actually incorporated from the worship of other gods. That's where they come from. Christmas is a contrived holiday. It's not biblical, and that's why the Puritans and Pilgrims didn't celebrate it. That's why it was outlawed in the colonies. That's why it was not practiced in the New Testament, and not for hundreds of years after Christ's death, burial, and resurrection. It was implemented as a political religious feat to placate the people. Yeshua was not born on December 25th, right? And the early church did not celebrate that. So, right? He wasn't. Nope. So, does the biblical text give us an idea of when Christ was actually born? Yes, it does. There is biblical language experts and theologians who believe there is great evidence, and we're going to share that in a future video on the actual birth of Christ, and it will be astounding to you. There's evidence in the heavens, so to speak, of when that actually took place. But it wasn't December 25th, and it wasn't on the year zero. The calendar is not accurate. But we're going to look at that in a future video. I hope this has been interesting, and I hope you can take this with the heart in which it is given. We are wanting to share the truth. That is it. The truth, the biblical text. And when it conflicts with church or religious tradition, we need to make the decision. Where are we going to bank our faith? Is it going to be in tradition, or is it going to be in the actual biblical text and the recounted history? Now, this is not secret. None of this is secret. It's all out there. It's just it's not taught in the Christian community. And you wonder why. See, not knowing, it makes Christians look like fools because they're doing all of these things that pagan worshipers did. They're just saying they're doing it for Jesus. But it never was for Jesus. And just because you do it for Jesus doesn't make it right. If God said, don't do it. But we each have to come to that conclusion for our own self. But as for me, my household, I say, know the truth, stand on the truth, speak the truth. God bless you. This has been the Cosmic Bible, and I am S.W. Kibler, your guide into the biblical text where the truth actually does live. God bless you.